a podcast about understanding counselling and how it works in everyday life. In this episode, we'll explore how counselling changed the way people relate to their own experiences over time. Most people assume that change comes from altering circumstances, fixing a problem, making a decision, removing a stressor. While those things can help, counselling works in a different direction. It changes how experience is met rather than what experience occurs. In everyday life, reactions tend to happen quickly. Something is said, a feeling appears, a response follows. Counselling slows this sequence down. It creates space between what happens and how it is responded to. The space matters. Over time, people often notice their internal reactions becoming easier to recognize. A familiar tension appears, but instead of taking over immediately, it is noticed. This noticing does not eliminate the feeling, but it changes the relationship with it. This links back to what we explored earlier around emotional regulation. Regulation improves not because emotions disappear, but because people become more familiar with how emotions move through them. Familiarity reduces urgency. Counseling also changes how people interpret their reactions. Instead of seeing a response as a failure or a flaw, it becomes something to understand. For example, withdrawing after a difficult interaction might be recognized as a way of managing overload rather than a personal shortcoming. This shift reduces self-criticism. When reactions are understood as signals rather than mistakes, people tend to respond to themselves with more steadiness. That steadiness influences behavior outside the counseling space as well. Another everyday change people notice is a difference in how long reactions last. A difficult conversation still affects them, but the impact does not last longer in the same way. Recovery becomes faster, attention returns more easily to the present. Counseling also affects how people hold uncertainty. Earlier in the series, we talked about anxiety and the difficulty of not knowing. Over time, counseling supports a greater tolerance for uncertainty. Not because certainty is achieved, but because uncertainty becomes less destabilizing. This shows up in small ways. Decisions are made with less rehearsal, waiting feels less charged, outcomes are allowed to unfold without constant monitoring. These are not dramatic changes, but they accumulate. Importantly, counseling does not make people detached or indifferent. Emotions still arise, relationships still matter. What changes is the intensity with which everything needs to be managed. People often describe feeling more present in their own lives. They are less caught in anticipation or rumination. This presence is not something they try to maintain. It emerges naturally as reactions become more familiar. Counseling also influences how people relate to others. When internal experiences is less overwhelming, there is more capacity to listen, respond, and set limits. Boundaries become easier to recognize because internal signals are a lot clearer. This does not mean life becomes smooth. Stress, loss, and conflict still occur. Counseling does not remove difficulty, it changes how difficulty is carried. Over time, this different relationship with experience becomes the main benefit of counseling. Not insight alone, not solutions alone, but a steadier way of being with whatever arises. In the next episode, we'll move fully into the everyday experience by exploring why people often feel emotionally exhausted even when life appears manageable, and how counseling helps make sense of that without reducing it to stress or burnout. That's the scope of this episode. Each episode focuses on one specific theme, and this was it. We'll leave it here for now and move on in the next episode.